In this video, we're going to discuss the idea of basic rhythms and rests, and we'll see how they're notated. Every musical event exists in time. That means that in order to play a note, we need to know when it starts and how long it lasts. Most of the music we play and listen to is organized in beats. You're probably familiar from whatever commercial or popular music you listen to. Usually it's the drums and the bass sometimes that keep our sense of beat, and it can be very strong and insistent, and it's very easy to hear where the beat is. The rhythm section gives that to you. A beat is a pulse, and it's usually of a consistent duration during a given section of music. That is to say that even though the other rhythms around it may be different, the pulse is steady. Listen to any piece of music you like. You can probably either tap your foot or clap your hand to the beat. A better way to really feel the regularity of the pulse is to walk to the beat. So put on some music and go ahead. Take a step for each beat you're hearing. If the piece is really fast, then maybe you'll take a step for every 2 beats that you're hearing. I'm going to play for you 2 examples, one from popular music and one from classical music, in which we don't have drums giving us the beat, but we'll still hear some regularity to it. So the first one is a well-known Beatles song, Eleanor Rigby. Let's listen and then we'll talk about the beat.
Church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Where do they all belong?
Okay, we'll stop right there for now. You probably noticed that once the verse started, you heard a regular from the stringed instruments. That's the beat, and you heard it happening steadily. You could clap your hands to it, you could tap your foot to it, you could walk to it. Later on in the verse, where we heard it, the rhythm's doubling. That doesn't mean that the beat doubles. The beat is still like that. So you could have faster rhythms without increasing the speed of the beat. Okay, now let's listen to another example. And this is from Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. Okay, let's stop right there. What's interesting about this piece is that you heard a regular pulse, ta 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 ta, and we have a choice of how to count that. We can either count beat, 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 or count every other one, which is what Vivaldi wants us to do by the way he notates it. Dot, 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 dot. So you're hearing beat and beat and beat and beat and. So you see that the beat can be flexible, whether we're counting the faster beat or whether we're counting the slower beat. What's important is that we keep a regular count of the beat so that all the players can coordinate and that we keep track of things. So in some ways, whether it's a faster or a slower beat may not matter to the listener, but it matters very much to the performers who have to coordinate what they're doing. In the next video in the series, we'll discuss how music organizes beats into measures and a regular meter. But for now, let's discuss how music represents the duration of each note in relation to the beat. Music uses proportions to represent duration. The most basic durations are as follows, and this is what we call a whole note, and then a half note, and then a quarter note, and then an eighth note. There are more, but we'll start with these, and each one is half the length of the previous. So the whole note, the half note, the quarter note, the eighth note. So how can we measure this length? By keeping track of the beat. This is our musical measure of time. Let's assume that a beat lasts as long as a quarter note. Music that has notes that only last as long as the beat would be written like this, and you see a whole string of quarter notes. Ta 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 ta, etc. Now imagine a note that lasts as long as 2 beats. So what's twice as big as a quarter? A half. So it's just like a simple fraction. So if we're reading this with 4 half notes and our beat is still quarter notes, ta 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 ta, then we're counting 2 beats for every note. So we would perform that ta 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 ta, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. And yes, a whole note lasts twice as long as a half note, so it lasts as long as 2 half notes or 4 quarter notes. So if you see these rhythms and the beat is still ta 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 quarter notes, then each of those whole notes are 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, etc. We can go in the other direction and have notes that are less than the length of a beat. So if we divide a quarter note by 2, we get an eighth. So if we're reading this and the beat is still ta 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 ta, then the way we play that is ta 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 ta. We heard that both in the Beatles tune and in the Vivaldi as well. If there are lots of those, it can be a little tough to read with all those flags, that's a flag, on the notes. So we often organize them by drawing a beam between notes in place of the flags. So what was written like this before now becomes that, and that's a lot easier to read, isn't it? We also have ways to represent silences or rests, since we aren't necessarily playing notes every moment of a piece. They work a lot like the note rhythms, but with different symbols, so you could think of a rest as a musical note with no sound. The following are each of the rests that last as long as the note that it replaces. So here's a whole note, and here's a whole rest. Here's a half note, and here's a half rest. A quarter note and a quarter rest, an eighth note and an eighth rest. So let me talk a bit about these two. The visual difference between a whole rest and a half rest is very subtle. and I'll show you on a musical staff in a second. They each sit in the middle of the staff, but one way to remember is that the whole rest, think of the whole rest as heavier, and it sinks below a staff line, whereas the half rest is lighter, and it floats on top of a staff line. So on this staff, something like that sits below that staff line, that's a whole rest. So we would count 4 notes of silence. And the one that sits on top of that staff line is a half rest, and we would count 2 beats of silence. There's a lot more to say about rhythms, and you'll study all of that in our musicianship and theory classes. But in the meantime, that's where we'll stop for now, and this is a good introduction. Watch the next video and the other videos in the series. Thank you.